All right, so you're here because you want to get to the heart of things, right?
Exactly. Cut through all the noise and really understand what makes things tick.
That's exactly what we're doing today. We're taking a deep dive into Peter Thiel's Zero to One. You know, that book about innovation, about startups, about building the future.
Zero to One, The Path to Innovation, to give it its full title.
Yeah, Zero to One, The Path to Innovation. It's kind of a classic in the tech world.
Definitely, and for good reason. It really gets you thinking differently about how truly groundbreaking companies are built.
So we've got the book, and we've also pulled together a bunch of other resources, articles, interviews, and analyses, all focused on this central question, really. How do you build something entirely new? How do you go from zero to one, as Thiel puts it, instead of just, making small improvements to things that already exist?
Right. It's not about iterating, it's about creating.
Exactly. And Thiel offers some really interesting, sometimes even controversial ideas on how to do just that. So our goal today is to distill, unpack his 10 key concepts of what he calls true innovation.
We want to give you the essential insights without the fluff so you can apply these ideas to your own thinking, whether you're a budding entrepreneur or just someone who's curious about how the world really changes.
Okay, so let's jump right in. The first big idea we're going to tackle is this whole concept of monopoly versus competition.
Uh-huh.
Now, the word monopoly usually, sets off alarm bells, right?
Yeah, for sure.
A negative connotation. It sounds anti-competitive, like it's bad for consumers.
Right. It's like the textbook villain in Economics 101.
But Thiel outwardly makes this kind of surprising argument for why monopolies, at least in a specific context, can actually be good for innovation.
And it's really not as counterintuitive as it might seem at first glance.
Yeah, so can you unpack that a little bit?
Sure. So what's really interesting here isn't some sort of, blanket defense of just dominating a market and then jacking up prices. Thiel's argument is more nuanced than that. He's suggesting that in super competitive markets, companies are often so focused on just surviving, on getting that tiny little edge over their rivals.
Right, just staying afloat.
Yeah, that they just don't have the resources or the long-term vision to invest in truly new, groundbreaking ideas. Their profits are super thin and all their energy goes into just keeping up with the competition.
It becomes this kind of zero-sum game, right? Like if I win, you lose, and vice versa.
Exactly. And in that environment, it's really hard to think about creating something fundamentally different, something truly innovative.
So a monopoly, in Thiel's view, is a different story. But, and this is key, he's talking about a specific kind of monopoly, a temporary monopoly, one that's created by offering something the world has never seen before.
Right. You're not manipulating the system to create artificial scarcity. You're creating something so valuable, so unique, that you naturally become the dominant player in that space, at least for a while.
And these companies, because they have less competition, they generate, well, pretty substantial profits, right?
Yeah, exactly. And those profits, Steele argues, can then be reinvested into more ambitious research and development. They have the stability to think years, even decades ahead, and to take on bigger, riskier projects that companies in cutthroat competition just can't afford to.
So it's this kind of counterintuitive idea that having a temporary monopoly achieved through genuine innovation can actually lead to more innovation down the line.
Precisely.
Okay, but we have to be super clear here, right? Keels isn't advocating for monopolies that are created through, shady business practices or by lobbying the government to shut out competition.
Right. That's a really important distinction to make. He's very specifically talking about monopolies that emerge organically because you've created something truly new and valuable, something that solves a problem or fulfills a need in a way that nobody else has before.
And he even argues that this kind of innovation, the kind that leads to temporary monopolies, is ultimately better for consumers in the long run
Hmm.
because it creates new products and services that wouldn't have existed otherwise.
Exactly. Think about, the early days of smartphones. If Apple had been forced to compete in the existing cell phone market, just trying to make slightly better flip phones or something,
Right, trying to grab a bigger share of the existing pie
yeah, we might not have ever seen the iPhone.
or the whole app ecosystem that came with it.
Right. The whole way we use mobile technology would probably be completely different.
Okay, so to kind of bring this all together, Thiel's core point about monopolies is that a truly innovative business isn't trying to get a bigger slice of an existing pie. It's trying to bake a whole new pie.
That's a great analogy. It's about creating a new market where you are, at least initially, the dominant player.
So for our listeners out there, think about the successful companies you admire. Are they the ones that are constantly locked in these fierce battles with competitors? Or are they the ones that have managed to carve out their own unique space by offering something truly novel?
It's a question worth asking, where does true value creation come from? Is it just optimizing and improving existing solutions, or is there a whole other level, a different kind of value that's created when you make that leap to something entirely new?
Teal definitely comes down on the side of those 0 to 1 moments.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Okay, so let's move on to the second big idea, the power of secrets. This one's pretty intriguing.
It is.
It basically suggests that, the most valuable businesses are often built on something that's hidden in plain sight.
Like an overlooked truth about the world, something that everyone else is missing.
Yeah, and what's really interesting here is that these secrets aren't necessarily, like some top secret information locked away in a vault somewhere.
Right, not like government conspiracies or anything.
Exactly. They're often just truths that, for whatever reason, haven't been widely recognized or agreed upon. Like maybe everyone's looking at a problem a certain way, but you see a totally different solution that nobody else has considered.
And Teal actually poses this really direct and challenging question. What important truth do very few people agree with you on?
Ooh, that's a deep one, right?
It is. It really forces you to think about your own assumptions, about what you believe to be true about the world, even if most people would disagree.
Because if you can identify a fundamental truth that everyone else is missing,
And then build a business around it.
yeah, you're basically operating in a much less crowded space,
Hmm.
maybe even in a completely empty space, which takes us back to that first point about monopolies, right?
Exactly. It's about having that unique insight, that different perspective on how things are or how they could be.
But the crucial thing is that it's not enough just to have the secret. You have to act on it. You have to build something that leverages that overlooked truth, that brings it to the world in a way that creates value.
It's not about being contrarian just for the sake of it, just to be the odd one out.
Yeah.
It's about having a well-reasoned belief, something that you've thought deeply about, that goes against the conventional wisdom. And if you turn out to be right, the potential rewards are enormous.
It's like having that aha
Mhm.
moment, but then actually doing something with it.
Right, not just letting it sit there in your head.
So, for everyone listening, think about this. What's something that you believe to be true that most people would disagree with? Maybe it's something about your industry or about human behavior or about how technology is evolving. It could be anything.
And then ask yourself, if I'm right about this, if this is a real overlooked truth, what can I build? What kind of business, what kind of product, what kind of service could I create that would capitalize on this insight?
That's a really powerful exercise because it might just lead you to your next big idea.
It might.
All right, let's move on to concept number 3. Start small, dominate a niche. Yeah, this one might sound pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah, it's kind of classic startup advice.
Crawl before you walk, that kind of thing.
But Teal gives it this very specific strategic angle. It's not just about, starting with a small, manageable project. It's about deliberately targeting a small, very well-defined market and then achieving complete dominance within that niche.
It's like becoming a big fish in a small pond first. And
Exactly.
then once you've got that pond locked down, you can start thinking about expanding to bigger lakes and maybe even the ocean eventually.
Right. And the reason this is so strategically powerful is because it allows you to really deeply understand your target customer. You can tailor your product or service to their very specific needs. You can get really good at marketing and selling to them, and you can build a really strong brand reputation within that small community.
You become the go-to solution, the undisputed leader in that space.
Exactly.
And Teal actually uses Amazon as a really great example of this in action.
Oh, yeah, it's a classic case study.
They didn't start out, trying to be the everything store, selling like every product imaginable from day one.
Right. They were laser focused in the beginning.
Yeah. They started with books, just books.
And they built an incredible online bookstore.
They just totally dominated that niche.
And only then did they start to gradually and very strategically expand into other product categories one at a time.
First it was music and DVDs, then electronics, then, well, pretty much everything eventually.
But the point is, they didn't try to boil the ocean all at once. They started small, they got really good at one thing, they built a loyal customer base, and then they leveraged that success to expand into new areas.
And if we kind of zoom out and think about this from a risk management perspective, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, for sure.
Because if you try to tackle this huge, diverse market right from the start, you're probably going to spread your resources way too thin, right? You're going to have trouble getting any real traction. And you're going to be really vulnerable to competitors who are more focused.
By dominating a niche first, you're building a solid foundation.
Yeah, like you're getting your sea legs.
You're generating revenue, you're building customer loyalty, and you're learning a ton along the way, which you can then use as you grow.
So Thiel's advice for anyone out there with a big world-changing idea is to really think about this. What's the smallest possible well-defined market where you can realistically become a monopolist right from the start?
What's your beachhead? What's the specific group of people that you can really serve incredibly well and become the undisputed leader for? That's where you should begin. That's your launching pad.
Okay, let's move on to concept number 4, the importance of vertical progress. Now, Thiel makes this really important distinction between what he calls horizontal progress and vertical progress.
Yeah, and it's a really fundamental concept for understanding his whole philosophy of innovation.
So can you break those down for us? Like, what's the difference?
Sure. So horizontal progress, in Thiel's definition, is basically taking existing ideas, technologies, or business models and spreading them more widely.
Okay, so it's about making things more accessible, more efficient, more widely adopted.
Exactly.
Think about like globalization.
Yeah, perfect example. It's taking existing manufacturing processes and applying them in new parts of the world.
Or think about like bringing electricity to rural communities.
Right. It's taking an existing technology and making it available to more people.
Okay, so that's horizontal progress. What about vertical progress?
Vertical progress is about creating something entirely new.
Oh, okay.
It's about those 0 to 1 leaps that we were talking about earlier.
It's not about copying or adapting. It's about inventing something truly novel.
Exactly. And this is where true innovation, the kind that leads to significant advancements in technology and society, really comes from.
So horizontal progress is like, I don't know, going from a horse-drawn carriage to more horse-drawn carriages.
Right.
Maybe with better suspension or more comfortable seats.
Yeah, you're making incremental improvements.
But vertical progress is like inventing the internal combustion engine.
And the car itself.
Boom. A whole new paradigm.
Exactly. Vertical progress is about those technological leaps, those breakthroughs that create things that didn't even exist before.
And Thiel's argument is that vertical progress is what really drives like significant societal advancement.
Yeah, it creates new industries, generates new wealth, solves problems in ways that we couldn't have even imagined before.
Think about the internet.
Or antibiotics.
Or, going back to our earlier example, the smartphone.
Right. Those were all vertical leaps that fundamentally changed the world.
And those vertical leaps, that creation of something truly new, often lead to those temporary monopolies that we were talking about earlier, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because if you've invented something that's never existed before, well, by definition, you have no competition. At least not initially.
So for our listeners out there, think about the work you do, the problems you're trying to solve, the industry you're in. Where are the opportunities for vertical progress? Where can you create something truly new, something that breaks the mold, something that pushes the boundaries of what's possible?
It's a different way of thinking, right? It's not about just making things better. It's about making things different.
And that difference, that vertical leap, is where the real magic happens.
It is.
All right, concept number 5 shifts the focus to the people side of things. Build a strong team. Now, this might sound kind of obvious. Right?
Yeah, everyone knows that having a good team is important.
But Thiel actually has some really specific, really insightful things to say about this, particularly in the context of building something new.
Yeah, he goes beyond just, saying hire good people. He digs into the specifics of what makes a really great startup team.
So one of the things he really emphasizes is this idea of complementary skills.
Right. It's not just about finding a bunch of brilliant individuals. It's about finding individuals whose skills fit together.
Yeah, like puzzle pieces.
Exactly. You need people who bring different but essential strengths to the table.
So maybe you've got your visionary leader who's really good at the big picture stuff.
Right.
And then you need your technical genius who can actually build the product.
And you need your marketing whiz who can get the word out.
And your operations person who can keep everything running smoothly.
Yeah, and all these different pieces have to work together seamlessly.
And Thiel also stresses the importance of having a really deeply shared vision.
Yeah.
Like, everyone on the team needs to be on the same page about what they're building and why.
Absolutely, because in the early days of a startup, you're going to face a lot of uncertainty, a lot of challenges.
Things are going to be messy.
Exactly, and you need a team that can communicate effectively, that can trust each other, that can work together even when things get tough.
And Thiel even goes so far as to say that in the very early days of a startup, Cultural fit and a strong sense of camaraderie are even more important than just raw talent alone.
Which is kind of interesting, right?
It is. Because you would think that, if you're building something truly innovative, you just want the smartest people in the room no matter what.
But Thiel argues that if those really smart people can't work together effectively, if they're constantly butting heads or second-guessing each other,
If they don't have each other's backs,
yeah, then all that brilliance is kind of wasted.
it's like having a car with a really powerful engine but no steering wheel.
Right.
So to kind of tie this all together, Thiel's point about building a strong team is that it's not just about individual talent. It's about finding people who can work together effectively, who share the same values, who are all rowing in the same direction.
And who are really excited about the mission.
Yeah, exactly.
Because that shared passion, that sense of purpose is what's going to get you through the tough times and ultimately help you succeed.
So for all the entrepreneurs out there listening, don't just focus on hiring brilliant individuals. Focus on building a team, a real team.
One that can weather the storms together and come out stronger on the other side.
All right, number 6 on our list is the founder's role is crucial. Now, this one's all about leadership.
Yeah, specifically about the importance of really strong leadership, especially from the people who are actually building the company from the ground up, the founders.
And Thiel's basic argument here is that a startup, especially in its early stages, is very much a reflection of its founders.
Right. It's like an extension of their personalities, their vision, their drive.
They set the tone, they make the big decisions, and they're the ones who are ultimately responsible for guiding the company through all the uncertainty and challenges of building something new.
And he points to some really great examples, iconic founders who've really made their mark. People like Elon Musk at Tesla,
Mark Zuckerberg in the early days of Facebook.
the Google guys, Larry Page and Sergey Brin.
Yeah, these weren't just CEOs, they were visionaries. They had a very specific idea of what they wanted to build,
Yeah.
and they were relentless in pursuing that vision.
And their personalities, their quirks, even their flaws became part of the DNA of their companies.
Which is pretty fascinating when you think about it,
It is.
because it really raises this question about the nature of leadership in the context of innovation.
Right. What does it take to lead a company that's doing something truly new, something that's never been done before?
Because it's not just about, traditional management skills.
Yeah.
It's about having this really clear, really compelling vision of what the future could be.
And it's about being able to inspire other people.
Your employees,
Yeah.
your investors, even your early customers.
Yeah.
You have to get them all to buy into your vision, even when things are uncertain.
Yeah, you have to be a believer. And you have to be able to convince other people to believe too.
So Thiel's point here is that the founder isn't just an administrator or a manager. They're more like, I don't know, an architect of the future.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
They're the ones who are setting the direction, who are creating the blueprint for what the company's trying to build.
And they're the ones who are ultimately responsible for making sure that blueprint becomes a reality.
So for all the aspiring founders out there, think about this. What's your vision for the future? What kind of world do you want to create? And are you the kind of leader who can inspire others to help you build it?
Those are big questions, but they're the ones that really matter.
They do. Okay, number 7 is a really interesting one. It's called Sales Matter as Much as Product.
Mm-hmm.
And this is one that I think a lot of people, especially really technical founders, kind of overlook or underestimate.
Yeah, because you would think that if you build a truly amazing product, it will just sell itself, right?
Right. Build it and they will come.
But Thiel argues that that's almost never the case. Building a great product is only half the battle. The other half is getting that product into the hands of your customers.
It's about distribution. It's about marketing. And it's about sales.
All those things that sometimes get seen as, less glamorous or less important than the actual product development.
But Thiel is adamant that they are just as crucial for success.
Absolutely.
You can have the most innovative product in the world, the most brilliant solution to a problem. But if nobody knows about it,
Or if it's too hard to buy.
or if people don't understand why they need it,
Yeah, then it's all for nothing.
you're going to fail.
And Thiel stresses that sales and distribution shouldn't be an afterthought.
Right. It's not something you figure out later.
It needs to be baked into your business plan from day one. You need to understand your target market deeply. You need to figure out the most effective ways to reach them. And you need to develop compelling ways to convince them that your product is worth their time and money.
So it's not enough to just be a brilliant engineer or a brilliant inventor.
No.
You also need to be a brilliant salesperson Or at least you need to partner with someone who is.
Right. Because if you can't sell your product, then all your hard work, all your innovation is going to be for nothing.
So for everyone out there building something new, don't neglect the sales side of things. Don't assume that a great product will just magically find its way to its customers. You have to be proactive, you have to be strategic, and you have to be really good at selling what you've created.
It's a crucial part of the equation.
It is. Okay. Number 8 delves into the world of venture capital. It's called the power law of venture capital.
Yeah.
And this one's particularly relevant for founders who are, thinking about raising money from VCs.
Yeah, because it explains how venture capitalists think about risk and return. And it's really different from how most people think about investing.
So the basic principle here is that in venture capital, the returns are not evenly distributed.
Right. It's not like you invest in 10 companies and they all grow at like a nice steady 10% per year.
It's more like, 9 of those companies might fail completely.
Or barely return anything.
But that 10th company,
that one explodes.
it becomes a Google or an Amazon or a Facebook.
Then it returns, 100x or 1000x your initial investment.
So it's this very skewed distribution of returns.
Yeah, it's what's called a power law distribution. A very small number of investments produce the vast majority of the gains.
And for founders who are seeking venture capital, this has really big implications. Because it means that VCs aren't looking for companies that will just achieve moderate success.
Right.
They're not looking for companies that will just generate nice, steady, predictable growth.
They're looking for the outliers.
The companies that have the potential to become absolutely massive.
To completely dominate their markets.
To become the next unicorns.
Exactly. Because those are the companies that will generate the outsized returns that VCs need to make up for all the other investments that don't pan out.
Great. So if you're going down the venture capital route, you need to be thinking really big.
Yeah, like audaciously big.
You need to be able to paint a picture of a future where your company is not just successful, but world-changing.
Where you're not just competing in an existing market, but creating a whole new one.
And where the potential upside is, absolutely enormous.
Because that's what's going to get VCs excited. That's what's going to convince them to write you a check.
All right, let's move on to number 9. The future is not random. Now, this one's a bit more philosophical.
It is.
It kind of challenges this notion that startup success is just a matter of luck.
Yeah, like being in the right place at the right time or just getting lucky with a viral marketing campaign or something.
Right, or just stumbling into a great idea.
But Thiel argues that, while there's always an element of chance involved,
Sure, luck plays a role.
the most successful startups aren't just passive recipients of good fortune. They're actively shaping the future.
Okay, so they're not just riding the wave, they're creating the wave.
Exactly.
They're making informed bets about how the world is going to evolve.
Yeah.
And they're building companies that are designed to thrive in that anticipated future.
So it's not about just, seeing what happens and then reacting.
It's about having a vision, having a thesis about where things are going, and then building something that aligns with that vision.
And Thiel argues that this is what separates the truly great companies from the rest. They don't just follow trends, they set them.
They anticipate the future, and then they build the products and services that that future will demand.
So it's about being proactive, about making deliberate choices about what you're building and why.
So for all the entrepreneurs out there, don't just ask yourself, what's hot right now? Ask yourself, what will be hot 5 years from now, 10 years from now? What problems will need to be solved? What opportunities will emerge?
And then start building for that future, even if it doesn't exist yet.
Oh, and finally, number 10, long-term thinking wins. This one's pretty self-explanatory, but I think it's worth digging into a little bit.
Yeah, because it gets to the heart of what Thiel believes really drives sustainable success.
So he's basically arguing that companies that prioritize long-term value creation,
The ones that are playing the long game.
yeah, they ultimately outperform the companies that are just focused on short-term gains.
The ones that are always chasing the next quarterly earnings report.
Exactly. And he points to companies like, Google and Apple.
Yeah, the companies that have consistently invested heavily in research and development, that have built strong moats around their core businesses, that have taken a long-term view of their growth and their impact.
And those companies have created, incredibly valuable and resilient businesses.
Yeah, they've weathered economic downturns, they've fended off competition, they've adapted to changing market conditions.
And they've done it all by focusing on building something that would last.
Something that would continue to be relevant and valuable for years to come.
So Thiel's message here is pretty clear. Don't just try to make a quick buck. Don't chase fads.
Build something that matters. Build something that will stand the test of time.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive into 0 to 1, it's clear that Peter Thiel offers this really compelling and sometimes really contrarian perspective on how to build companies that are truly innovative and truly impactful.
Right. He challenges a lot of the conventional wisdom around business and entrepreneurship.
And his core message is this: true innovation isn't about competing in existing crowded markets.
It's about creating entirely new ones. It's about going from 0 to 1.
And at the heart of all of these concepts, all 10 of them, is that really fundamental question that Thiel poses: what will you build?
It's a question that should really resonate with anyone who's listening to this, whether you're an entrepreneur, a creator, an artist, an engineer, or just someone who's curious about how the world changes.
Because it's a challenge to think bigger, to think differently, to think about the future you want to create, and then to actually go out and build it.
So, as you go about your day-to-day, as you think about your work, your projects, your ideas, keep that question in mind. What will you build? What will you create that will move the world from 0 to 1?
Because that's where the real magic happens. That's where the future is made.
And that future is waiting for you to build it.
Thanks for joining us.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.
Until then.